Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Law enforcement officials, what is the most obscure law you've ever had to enforce and how did it happen? I was a military policeman, separated little over a year ago. I separated because of this exact reason, because it happens all the time. I worked at a certain base at a certain location, nothing dangerous. At the time, I was an E3 scanning IDs at the main gate. Usually, it just goes ding with other info on it indicating all is good. A young kid, 16 or 17, pulls up in a small car, hands me his ID like everyone else does. He's wearing baseball outfit with his gear in the back seat, face is sweaty, left arm has dirt on it, probably baseball practice. On this instance, my scanner didn't go ding, it went beep beep beep, which is bad. I look over the scanner and see that it's telling me this kid is in trouble of something. After a phone call to my supervisors, I am told I need to arrest and detain him for pickup because he isn't allowed to be driving on the installation, suspended license for some form of traffic violation. I ask over the phone when it expires, and to my amusement, it ends on that day's date. So, I obviously know this kid, he was actually coming home from baseball practice, though he was allowed to drive today. I told my supervisors I would let him on base as long as he parks in the car lot nearby and has someone pick him up since it's obvious he assumed he could drive today. They agreed. I get off the phone, tell the kid to park his car in a nearby lot to talk to him. I tell him he can't be driving yet, but tomorrow he is allowed to. He was very apologetic. Nice kid. He calls his dad, who ended up being a high-ranking officer, to pick him up. As I say goodbye and walk away, my radio is going off by my supervisor's supervisor. Evil D0H Nut, you will apprehend that individual immediately. I will be en route to pick up and read him his rights. Stand by for my arrival. I felt so bad for the kid. I felt like we became friends, so I told him to get off the phone and how sorry I was that I had to do this. You could see his face how sad he was that he is going to be in trouble with his dad now. I told him it isn't anything bad. We will work it out, I promise. Handcuffed and searched him. He was so sad. He did nothing wrong, wasn't even on the installation yet. I was being the helpful cop to the community. Then some idiot supervisor lead thought he was being the hero of justice. Luckily though, kid was alright. Another patrol came by, heard what was happening, said he would take the kid, told me to unhandcuff him. He said, I'll take the rap for this one, Evil D0H Nut. And he did just that. Kid went to his father, who yelled at the supervisor lead. They came out and thanked me later that day. Sometimes officer discretion is all it takes to form a trustful relationship with the community. We have the High Hedges Act 2011 in this country. A guy phones up the council complaining that his neighbor's hedges were blocking light into his living room. Fun thing about this law is it only applies when the hedge is 2 meters 6'6" tall or over. We can't force anyone to trim the hedge below said height. We charge him some silly amount, up to 360 pounds, can't remember exactly, for the privilege of coming out to look, see the hedges blocking light, go to the neighbor and tell him to trim the hedge down or we'll have to serve a notice. The neighbor cuts the hedge down to 2 meters and it still blocks light into the room. We can't do anything more. This happens far more than it should. For clarification, I'm not a police officer. I work for a local authority as an environmental health officer, fancy term for health inspector. One time, my grandfather got a ticket for riding a horse without a lantern. Local cop and him weren't on good terms, and he was going to a friend's to get drunk, so he rode his horse instead of driving. On his way home at night, he said the cop stopped him because he couldn't cite him for being drunk. He wrote him up for riding a horse without a lantern. So, to clear some things up, keep in mind that my grandpa is 80, so this had to be about 60 years ago that this happened. I don't know what the laws were back then. Also, it was 60 years ago. Grandpa's memory can be a little fuzzy on the exact details, but this is the story as I heard it. My dad also attested to the fact that my grandpa did indeed get a ticket for riding a horse without a lantern. Not my story, but it does belong to my girlfriend's uncle. While he was an officer in San Antonio back in 1992, he was told that if he didn't write more traffic tickets, he was going to regret it. Big threat, I know. However, after demanding the order in writing, which he received, he proceeded to drive out to the I-10. Once he arrived, he proceeded to write a ticket to every car he could stop for illegally operating a motor vehicle on a state highway. The law in question has since been amended in 2013, but it stated that the only vehicles allowed to operate on a state-owned highway were horses and horse-drawn carriages. His boss was peed. Honking your horn in the absence of danger. A motorcycle cop cut me off as I was entering the freeway once with no siren. I didn't recognize he was a cop as it was dark, so I slammed on my horn and he immediately pulled me over. He said that the horn was too late after the instance of danger. Got a ticket, and to tack onto that, because he smelled weed, I was handcuffed on the side of the freeway while he waited for backup to help search my vehicle. Had to stand there for nearly an hour in heels. My feet really hurt. There was no weed. In New Jersey, there are very specific laws regulating the size of stop signs on ice cream trucks. I am not a law enforcement officer, but a legislative aide for a state representative. A few weeks ago, a very angry middle-aged man called the office complaining about the ice cream truck parked down the street from his house. At first, I thought he was kidding, but then he started citing New Jersey Statute 394-128.5, laying out how big an ice cream truck stop sign must be and how far it must extend off of the truck. I called the local police department, and after assuring them I was not a prank caller and that I did work for the senator, they said they would assign someone to the case. I got a call 2 days later saying they went down to the ice cream truck with measuring tape, and sure enough, the stop sign was not regulation size. The ice cream truck was cited, fined, and given a week to get a new stop sign. I'm not sure who calls the police or their senator's office about this type of stuff, but I have a funny feeling that this angry old guy was a competing ice cream man. I was on the receiving end of a bizarre law. A few friends and I frequented some of the local state parks on horseback. The horse I had at the time loved to swim, and whenever we had the opportunity to ride up the lake, I'd take him for a dip. On one excursion, a park ranger caught up to our group and everyone shouted at me to come back to shore. I get back to them and the ranger promptly hands me something. A ticket? I ask what on earth it was for. He stated that there is a regulation against operating a vehicle on the lake without a permit, and in said state park, equine are considered a vehicle. So I get fined for boating without a valid permit. On a horse. I'm not an officer, but my old neighbor was, and he actually had to arrest someone for walking around with an ice cream cone in their back pocket. It sounds dumb, but this is a rural area with lots of farms, and people who are intending to steal livestock will walk by with ice cream sticking out of their pockets so that animals will follow them. They never have to touch the animal at all. They just walk them out of their pen and into a trailer. For some reason, they got away with it for a long time because some other obscure law said you had to have a rope around the animal for it to be considered stealing, so they started using ice cream to just make them follow. So if any of you ever visit southwestern Kentucky, don't put any ice cream in your pocket. You will get arrested. Growing up in Oklahoma, my high school had an amnesty box that you could put prohibited items in and not get in trouble in case you accidentally brought them to school. The box itself looked like a heavy-duty safe with a slot near the top for putting in the contraband. The box was located near the main office, which was right smack dab in the center of the school. Anyway, this kid apparently had been out hunting over the weekend and had forgotten to take his rifle off the gun rack in his truck. He was running late and didn't want to take the time to go all the way back home, so he decided he would put the gun in the amnesty box. Obviously, he attracted a lot of attention walking through the school holding a rifle, and some people started to freak out. Campus police caught him as he was trying to figure out how to fit the gun in the amnesty box. They ended up arresting him for bringing a gun to school. He tried to defend himself by saying that he was clearly trying to put it in the amnesty box, but I guess the way the wording for the amnesty box was written is that you weren't given amnesty until the object was fully inside the box. He did get a bit of a break because he didn't have any ammunition with him. My neighbor is an amateur radio. One day, he calls me sounding peed, asking if I had installed any new electronic devices recently. I didn't, so I said no without knowing what was the problem. 1 week later, some technicians from the National Communication Department were knocking at my door, handling lots of weird detectors and asking if they could visit my house because a complaint about illegal use of certain frequencies had been filed against me. They tried every room in the house before finally finding the source. One LED light bulb was apparently sounding weird. They told me to change it, but didn't find me. Mine's pretty tame really, and not super obscure, I guess. I remember getting beat out for not writing enough tickets, because I wrote exactly 0 speeding tickets in my entire time as a military policeman. If I saw someone speeding, as long as it wasn't reckless, I'd flip my lights, bump my siren, and when they slowed down, I was happy. Our command even printed out a sheet showing who wrote how many tickets with emphasis on speeding/traffic violations. Anyways, I'm getting beat out about not writing tickets, so I'm like, F it, and go around writing up tons of tickets for people parking against the flow of traffic. Like, tons of them. If your car was parked on a street on, say, the right lane but facing the opposite way, ticket. These were non-monetary tickets, mind you. Literally not even worth the effort of writing and putting them into our case work system because they meant nothing but basically a warning. I wrote massive amounts of them. Didn't hear us about not writing tickets anymore after. Not any type of law enforcement, just heard this story from a friend. He was out on the lake boating with his family. On this lake, there must be 1 life jacket on board for every person on the boat. There was a random search by the boat police where they made sure this rule was enforced. Everyone on board had a life jacket, so they weren't worried. Then, the inspector steps on board and starts writing a ticket. Everyone is confused. The inspector says, "There's another person on this boat now. Where's his life jacket?" Just a D move by the inspector since they had the exact number of life jackets needed for the family. My boyfriend is a bylaw officer in a small town. My favorite story of his is about the lady with barbed wire all over her yard. He received a complaint from her neighbors and went to check the place out. She had completely covered her bushes and trees and the top of her fence in barbed wire because she was convinced that her neighbor had trained their cats to dig up her garden. They were throwing them over the fence, she said, so there was obviously no other alternative. He spent 20 minutes fighting with her about why she needed to take it down before he came up with an idea that she was satisfied might work. Use motion detector sprinklers to keep the cats away. So she takes down the wire, he gives her a warning, and everyone seems happy. A week later, he gets another call saying the barbed wire is back up. He goes to check it out, and sure enough, she has doubled the amount of wire and is furious when she sees him pull up. The cats love the sprinklers. They would run in and out of them all day playing, and now the yard is wet and muddy. The neighbors hated her and were using their cats to drive her insane. After an hour of trying to sort out her psychobabble and reason with her, he gave up and just handed her a huge fine. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all the support and the likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.